All right, welcome to this week's live office hours. Casey, how is it going?
Things are good. Things are good. Yeah, weather's heating up, and yeah, the Red Sox aren't, but that's a different story. But that's okay. But yeah, excited to kind of jump into some stuff. I know we've had a lot of users kind of either coming back to us from taking
Yeah.
a quick break, or a lot of new folks just getting started. So yeah, happy to, as a reminder, this is open office hours. Any questions, just shoot them our way. We can do a screen share with the platform, kind of do some examples or whatever is going to be best for folks.
Yeah, so we did not have this last week because some of our team was at the Proven Conference in Orlando, which was really fun. I was asked to do a breakout session on AI, so naturally, I immediately said yes and started crying of tears of happiness. And it was just fun, because it's such an interesting time where I've noticed in the last month, maybe 3 weeks, that more sellers are talking about AI, not just with me, right? It's usually like, yeah, for sure, it's with me. I get that. But there's just a lot more people that are talking about this stuff and playing with it. And so I heard a little bit more chatter at the Miami Seller Conference beginning of last month, people asking me questions. So, going into this one, I wasn't sure how many people would be interested in me geeking out on this. We ended up having a pretty packed house, which pretty awesome. And I got to demo some stuff and kind of illustrate where things are at. And the conversations after were just so fantastic because the point of what I wanted my breakout session to be was not to teach people how to do one specific thing. I wanted to teach people, here's where we're at today. Here's why you need to take this seriously. And here's how to think about this. And I had so many people come up after and just be like, dude, I just didn't know we were here yet. I'm like, right, that's exactly my point. And I kind of ended my talk. I didn't do slides or anything. I was, screen sharing. I pulled up the Figure O1 robot landing page and just let that ride towards the end, just as a furthering of, holy crap, this is not just software either. And it worked out pretty well. So we had a lot of great conversations. A lot of people, when I asked before I started speaking, like, how many of you have started to play around with ChatGPT? It's like 90% of the room. So it's catching on here, which is pretty impactful. So that was really fun. It was nice to see kind of what I've been driving for. My whole point in talking about this stuff so often is I want people to understand it and just get curious enough to go play with it and just and like kind of get into the weeds on it. And it looks like that's starting to happen. So that makes me very happy. I feel like my work is done on this front. So got Jim in here. Yeah, Jim, pleasure to meet you there as well. Got the new t-shirts. They're so comfortable too. I love them. Let's see. Jim had a question here. Is there a strategy that you can slow down the repricing timing? The goal is to give an updated price more time to see if it will sell at that higher price before it adjusts down. Casey, I'll let you jump on that one.
Yeah, so we don't have a strategy that will slow down the repricing time per se. In general, instant repricing or by Amazon standards, sending an update within 2 minutes. There is a little bit of a delay between them receiving that update and then processing it and it being reflected on the listing page. In terms of rules-based strategies, there isn't really any way to slow down that repricing time. But what I would recommend there, Jim, is going to be Maven. Or Maven AI is kind of optimized for that balance between sales velocity and profit margins. So it's not going to specifically target and try to acquire the buy box, but more so focus on that margin side. So I recommend using that on those listings. So it will kind of test various price points to find that optimal price. And if it's priced a little bit high, for example, no sales come through in a certain amount of time, it will then try to lower that price to take into account the sales velocity side of its logic. So that's what I would recommend there. If you are using Hyperdrive on that listing, this actually may be an instance where you might want to deactivate that so that repricing time still kind of sticks around that 2 minute mark as opposed to being around the 10-second mark. The other option you could have is once a price update comes through, you could actually turn repricing off. That would hold your pricing at the last pricing update until you turn it back on. So those would be the couple options, but I would recommend using Maven there because it will kind of take into account that margin and velocity aspect, if you will, and adjust accordingly. We do find that Maven learns on listings with high pricing activity more quickly than others, but I always recommend like 3 to 5 days to see if Maven optimizes itself. If not, once you hit the 1 week mark, you may want to go to rules based and go through some of those other options, maybe letting the update come through, turning off repricing, and seeing how performance goes from there.
Nice. Sorry, I just realized my my video was getting a little shaky. I was like, it's definitely not my internet. I was like, oh, I have an AI running right now in the background. I was like, you can stop working. It's fine. So very, very timely here. See, Lewayne, quick question. I added the Walmart Marketplace to my account late last week, but the listings are still spinning on the importing cycle and I cannot add repricing strategies. Let's see here. We've had this a few times. Lewayne, if you could please reach out to live chat support right now and just let them know this exact same thing. And we'll take a look and see if we can get you unblocked there. Sometimes it seems like it gets blocked every now and then. So it could be the case, but we'll get you sorted out there on the sooner side.
Yeah, there's probably 2 issues going on there, Lewayne. Specifically for Walmart listings, you have to actually create a Walmart specific strategy. So if you're trying to assign strategies to Walmart listings and you haven't created a Walmart strategy, no strategies will populate there. And then there have been instances where there's some missing data from the Walmart end. We're working with their team there. So that could be the case where it's missing from most likely the buy box report that they're sending our way. So that would potentially explain the importing cycle, if you will. But yeah, definitely reach out to chat. Finn's running that right now, and he'll be able to help get you sorted there.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. And yeah, just for clarity, we have 2 categories of strategies now. We have Amazon specific strategies and Walmart specific strategies. So depending on the listing and what channel that listing is connected to, you're only allowed to add that specific kind of strategy, just for clarity. See, Dylan, oh, I was just about to bring you up. This is funny. Did everything you told me at the conference and sell through on inventory skyrocketed. Next challenge will be to optimize credit card flow. Yes. Okay. So actually I was going to literally bring this up, kind of like my highlights of the Proven conference. So we sat down and, we started talking about some stuff, there's some manual work happening every like week or 2. I'm like, oh, we can automate that immediately. So we sit down, Casey, and we do what we always recommend, right? It's like 3 core strategies, 2 workflows. We set them up and I'm like, hey, let's go ahead and turn this on, I feel like he was a little hesitant. He's like, all right, we'll see. I was like, listen, I'm here tonight, tomorrow. Like if it goes bad, come find me. And next morning, I think you mentioned that sales went up like 30-something%. So we had a lot of inventory we were kind of sitting on that we really needed to move. And so we just put in the age of inventory workflow. I added those 3 core strategies. We flipped the switch, took off. I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is why we are so heavy on teaching these best practices, because if we can take all the data points that we've seen over the years, almost a decade at this point, and boil them down into simple starting points, it almost sounds too simplistic. It's like, is that it? It's like, actually, yeah. Like if you do this, you're like 80% of the way there. And you're ahead of like 60% of sellers. So doing those things really, really helps. Yeah, Lewayne does this perfectly. Age of inventory workflow is a game changer. Trust the process. Yes. It's funny because I just know once I get buy-in for the user to test it and they see the experience, they're hooked. Same thing with Maven, right? It's like, oh, I'm just not sure. I don't know if I trust AI, that kind of thing. It's like, hey, just try it. Give it a week. If it doesn't go well, you can turn it off and you can switch it. And they're like, yeah, don't touch it. Like it's going great. Leave it alone. We're all good here. So I appreciate everybody's openness to letting our team kind of jump in and help you guys out. We see this, we do it day in and day out. But we definitely know kind of what works, what doesn't work. But yeah, the conference was fantastic. We were the only repricing software there, which is so crazy to me because usually there's, 2 or 3 of us. So the only one there, which is pretty telling. But again, it was really good conversations, a lot of serious sellers, a lot of sellers asking about Walmart, which is awesome to me because I'm like, oh yeah, that's live. It's there now, you know? So that's been fantastic. But we're starting to see a lot of the stuff that you and I have been talking about over the past like 6 months, which is like the future is going to be multi-channel. We're seeing a lot more of those kind of conversations of, you know, I'm not necessarily leaving Amazon or Walmart. Like I'm going to sell on both. I'm going to find a way to make that work. And that seems to be kind of the focal point for a lot of sellers moving forward. And I think that's a good thing. I think all the reasons we've talked about previously, which is, you know, being able to have some risk mitigation, right? So being on multi platforms kind of protects you a little bit, but there's also pros and cons to every single one. And some of the cons are outweighed by the pros on the other. And so you can kind of balance out relatively well. But it's getting pretty exciting. It's funny. One of the things I got asked during the Q&A section on my breakout session was, can AI source for me? And I was like, you know, what's funny is like, this is my benchmark. Like, this is the thing I test for. Like when an agent, like a general purpose agent comes out, I have like a prompt that I've pre-written that I just test it. And most of the time it can't do well. They're not there yet from what I've seen. Could I hack it a little bit more? Probably, but I'm kind of thinking of it from like the general seller's perspective. And so funny enough, the thing that was just running in the background on my computer now, I pulled up and I was like, I'll show you what it looks like. Because somebody brought up something called computer use, which is giving a large language model control of your actual computer. So it's clicking, it's opening the browser, all these different things. And they're getting quite good. I just used one earlier today to help me pull some data that I just didn't want to manually pull myself. That was nice. So I, you know, while I'm speaking, I pull it up, give it a very horrible prompt, you know, and it just starts controlling the computer and doing its own thing. And eventually starts going in circles. Because the prompt was not great, right? It was like, go find me a profitable product on Vitacost. And it's like, okay, I don't know what any of that means. Like, obviously, if we had sat there for like an hour and really scoped a prompt, I think it actually would have gotten probably 70% of the way there. But even people seeing AI control the computer was just like an eye-opening experience where now it's like, what else could it do? And that's the thing, you know, Finn and I, we stayed up kind of late one night. We went to go grab dinner, and I think we stayed up for about 2 or 3 extra hours, just philosophically waxing on AI and all these different things. And I think people are finally starting to come around to the overwhelm of it, because it is very overwhelming. A lot of the questions were, how do I get started with this? I'm like, I wish I had like a one place to send you to get started. Like my answer is just be curious and play with this stuff and see where it breaks, experiment. But also just so eye-opening of just all the different things that it can do or will be able to do in the near future. And a lot of sellers were talking to me after the breakout session saying, I'm really thinking I don't need more VAs. I think I give my VAs more AI, and now they're 10x VAs. I'm like, that's exactly it. See, Chase has a question here. Why not allow a negative minimum ROI for a strategy? This is for protection purposes. When we first launched, we allowed this. The problem is, let's say you type in 20 because you want 20% ROI, but you accidentally hit the scroll wheel and not realize it on your mouse when you go to click something, and it scrolled down to negative 30. And now you got negative 30. So we had a lot of support tickets come through saying, hey, why am I getting negative values? And when we would watch the heat maps of it, we'd watch them do this and be like, oh, you didn't realize you hit your scroll wheel still in the input field, and that lowered the value by a decent amount. So we intentionally don't do that as a protective cautionary thing. Now, the workaround, though, is, you know, we kind of recommend this liquidation strategy, go down to 0% ROI, that's break even. So what you're seeing on the listing in that min value is the break-even value. So let's just call it $20. You could go in there and say, well, I'm actually willing to lose $5. Great. Go ahead and manually override that 20 to a 15, hit save. And now technically you're in a negative value. So we try to keep it we try to do a lot of things that protect our users and sellers when things could go wrong. That's the answer, to be honest. Casey, anything you want to add on to that?
No, we have seen that be requested, obviously, since we've
Yeah.
made the change from allowing that to not allowing that. So internally, we've discussed different ways to potentially do that, perhaps disabling the scrolling feature, things of that nature, but haven't quite landed on something. So that is in discussion. But for now, Chase, you'll want to do what Dylan said, manually set those min prices into a negative margin. Ideally, if you're liquidating, that 0% ROI should be enough to move those units. But obviously, there are some outlier listings and products there. So for those, you'll just want to set that negative ROI or specific manual minimum price manually rather.
And Lewayne has a good question here. I'll let you handle this, Casey.
Yeah, so right now, Maven is only available on the Amazon Marketplace. Currently, we found that the best approach on Walmart is to target the buy box and either match that price or price slightly below it. Though there are a lot of similarities between Amazon and Walmart, one of the main differences is how their buy box logic works. On Amazon, we know it's some combination of shipping time, seller rating, and price. And if you lose that buy box, you can typically gain it back pretty quickly by adjusting your price. On Walmart, it's actually very different. It functions in a sort of wait in line format, if you will. So if you become the buy box winner on Walmart, you'll actually maintain that buy box until you either sell out, you raise your price, or until a competitor price is below you. So because of that, the only strategy currently available on Walmart is that buy box targeting strategy. Like I said, we recommend either matching that price or pricing a few cents below that. And another example is the maintenance section on Amazon, trying to maximize margins in the buy box. Due to the differences in Walmart's buy box logic, it's actually not advantageous to raise your price when you become the buy box winner because you could lose it. And it is much more difficult to reacquire than it is on Amazon, for example. So long story short, Maven's only available on Amazon, and on that Walmart side, you want to use that buy box targeting strategy to either match or go a couple cents below that buy box winner.
Perfect. Yep. Could not have said it better. Casey, I'm curious. Have you been playing with AI more lately?
Yes, not necessarily on like the Amazon Walmart front. I'll kind of expose myself a little bit. My fantasy baseball team has lost 7 weeks in a row, so I've been trying to utilize other tools to hopefully inform my decision making a little bit more.
Yep.
And then outside of that, I always use it for planning trips.
Okay.
My girlfriend wants to go to Nashville in July for her birthday. I told her it's going to be really hot, but she still wants to.
It will. Welcome to the South.
So yeah, I use it for that. Different meal plans. I've used it a couple times if I don't have a lot of groceries in the house. I'd be like, hey, here are the ingredients I have. What should I make for dinner?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So kind of like my own version of Chopped in my kitchen, if you will. But yeah, it's been interesting to kind of play with it a little bit more. I've started to kind of take it at a higher level and focus on prompting, as we've kind of discussed on these office hours. Prompt engineering is going to be really crucial to getting the most out of AI. Even as AI continues to get better, it's always going to work more effectively with additional context. So I've played with different prompts, having it look for different solutions, mostly in my kind of recreational side of things, like I mentioned. But I've started to look at it for internal use, as we're trying to provide all of our users with the best customer experience. I've asked ChatGPT, like, how would you build like a world-class customer success experience, if you will. And just kind of having it spit out different outlines, different ways to approach things, and trying to apply those to our day-to-day processes and things like that. So it's been really interesting to kind of see it make the waves of developments that it has in the last, I would say probably specifically the last like 3 to 4 months. There's been a huge influx of updates and different models, and the intelligence of the AI becoming more intelligent. So I know we always talk about like, what does the future look like? And a lot of it is now the present. There's obviously still a decent amount that needs to be done for, like you said, Dylan, like programming it to like use different products. But in terms of the AIs that are built for a specific function, such as ChatGPT or things of that nature, they're much better at accomplishing their own jobs now. And it's really just been like exponential growth and improvements in the AI front. So it'll be really interesting to see that next wave of improvements.
Mhm.
Um, I know we talked about a couple weeks ago I think it was the OpenAI. I'm going to forget their names. The
Johnny Ive.
OpenAI,
Yeah.
yeah, they partnered with or the main Apple designer for what would assume to be probably some sort of AI hardware. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like when those products
Yeah.
start to be released. But yeah, it's a fast moving space, and it's tough to keep up. But it is interesting to even just casually play around with that stuff and see where it's at, and kind of think
Yeah.
about how you could use it to just improve your day to day.
Well, it's funny. It used to be recommended that everybody learns to code, and not necessarily so that you become like a software engineer level, but just so you have it as a tool set for solving problems, right? Um, I've done this a lot of times where I needed to run a calculation consistently. And I'm like, well, I can manually do this, or I could just write a Python script that does the calculation for me because Python's great at math and every coding language is. So, I would do that. But now I'm finding those things I could just give the process to Chat GPT with the inputs, and it's like, here's the answer. And, you verify it and it's correct. So what's interesting is there's a lot of problems that non-technical people would have to wait for software to be built for them to solve that exact problem, or they'd have to go learn to code. So the friction's too high. And now it's like, in a weird way, Chat GPT is like you building software, right? Like if I say, hey, here's the equation for X, here's the inputs as Y, do the math for me. That's technically a piece of software. And now you can just build your own stuff through natural language and be like, here's the process. Like, I did it earlier today, and we have an SOP in Notion. So I just copied it, gave it to it, and was like, here's how we do this. Here's the two inputs. It goes, okay, cool. Here's the outcome. I was like, okay, that's not bad. Actually, I don't have to pull up the calculator. I don't have to do all these other things. Like, that's pretty impactful. So like reduces the friction of me doing the task. It speeds things up. And now what I can do is I could just copy and paste that prompt with the two inputs and be like, do it again. It's like, now it's a recurring thing. And so, yeah, it's weird. It's like you can use it as a brainstorming partner, which I certainly do. You could use it as a therapist, which I low-key do sometimes too. You can also make your own little mini pieces of software with zero code. It just has the intelligence. And so a lot of things that you're having VAs do, where they have to take some inputs, make some decisions, or follow a process, more importantly, and then make a decision, you can now just give that SOP straight up to ChatGPT with the inputs and say, hey, what should I do? And so now you're not like, yeah, you're technically like orchestrating the work, like triggering that to happen, although you could automate that to some degree. But it takes you half a second. You don't have to wait. So now it's not like, well, I give it to my VA, I'll get it in like 24, 48 hours. It's like, no, you got it in 30 seconds. So it can speed you up. So funny enough, like the whole delegation thing is kind of getting flipped on its head, where it's like, yeah, I can give it to somebody else, but it's going to take me 30 seconds to use AI, and I can just have my answer like in that 30 seconds instead of waiting for the back and forth. That's pretty interesting. And you can have 5 of these running in parallel, right? Like kick one off, kick off the next one, and like come back, circle around, do the full loop. And so a lot more sellers are starting to do this, where they're writing really good SOPs. You mentioned the term prompt engineering. I started my session asking people if they've heard the term. Every hand went up, and I was like, do you really understand? Like, can you describe it to me in simple words? And nobody could. I was like, the reason for that is all it really is good communication. But engineers love creating terms, right? It's like, no, it's prompt engineering. It's like, I mean, sure. Okay, whatever. Like, there's some engineering aspects to it, certainly, but fundamentally it's good communication. It's giving context. It's communicating clearly what you want, clearly what you don't want, maybe giving some examples as output so it knows how you want the output to be given. And that's all it is. And so these are skills that apply to literally everything you do, right? Communicating well, understanding processes, and like writing them and optimizing them. And what's so cool is you can use AI to use AI, right? If you're like, okay, well, I kind of wrote like a draft SOP and I don't think it's great. Awesome. go give it to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you remove any redundancy? Can you help me optimize this for speed? And can you help highlight anything that's not really clear enough? And it will give you a better version of it out. And now you have basically a process you, in theory, could also give to ChatGPT to do. So it helped you make it, and it's going to help you complete it. What?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's really funny when you start to think about like AI feeding AI. Obviously, there's scenarios where there was like one example where someone uploaded a picture to ChatGPT and said, like, make me an exact copy, like make me 50 exact copies off of the previous version. And it interestingly degraded over time. Like there were slight tweaks, and then it kept like getting worse and worse. So there are obviously like not perfect examples of that, but I think the way you mentioned it, where it is like, hey, you like what would be the best way to find this specific answer, and then you specifically pump that in and then see how it responds. So
because the simple answer to that problem is, in the prompt I would say, I'm going to give you the original image. I want you to create 50 copies of the original image, and whenever you copy it, you always reference the original image, and most likely that would not have been a problem. But you see what I'm saying? Like the LLM was not wrong, but you weren't clear.
Right.
It's so like there's solutions to all these things, but like, I've always recommended the book Checklist Manifesto. I think it's a fantastic business book, very short read. But now you can basically use that to write clear prompts. The thing I was doing this morning, pulling data points from 3 different softwares, I caught myself just wanting to say, hey, go grab this. And I was like, nope. I was like, here's what I want you to do. Step 1, go to this site. Step 2, change the date range to last month. Step 3, get this value, then close it. Then, do that same process, but for this website. And it wasn't that much more work, but it made it work versus if I just said, hey, I need you to grab this from Google Ads as an example, it could probably figure it out, but it's going to be much slower and like have its own problems. So by just clearly stating that, one, I'm doing some future work for myself. Like I said, building a future proof prompt that I can deploy again. Because what you don't want to do is the opposite of what's called dry, DRY. Don't repeat yourself, right? If you write an amazing prompt, like it's worth you spending a little bit more time, if it's going to be a recurring thing that you want AI to do, to spend some time to really flesh out the prompt. And once you've done that, you get to reuse it forever. That's leverage. Like when I'm creating linear issues, like I have one process I wrote about on my blog post of how I pulled it off. I just copy and paste, and that work's done. And it takes me 10 seconds instead of 5 minutes clicking around and typing things. It's like these little things. But what's funny is I showed Finn this because he was with me when it got tweeted and it came across my radar. 2 people in the same day, actually. Dan Shipper, who runs Every.to, great company. He hired somebody to put him out of a job. He's the founder and CEO. He said, your sole responsibility is to automate me out of a job. And it's more like an experiment. Like, what is possible here? And then I found another site of somebody who shared in that thread that was like, oh, I'm kind of doing something similar. This is a person who works at another company. They're not a business owner, and they're tracking how many hours they're saving and how they're approaching this in a very quantitative way. And so you're starting to see a lot more people think through these kind of impossible questions and then just go see where it breaks, right? Because you might find, you can only automate 40% of your life. Cool, you just got 40% of your time back. That's, being a business owner, that's pretty daggum impactful. So you're seeing a lot more people do this. It's funny. It's getting more and more mainstream.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, the reason, or like we've said before, not necessarily in this session, the reason for using any tool is to either simplify a process or save you time. And AI in any form has just really been most impactful on the latter, saving you time. Obviously, you can take the time to do all the research and find the same answer, but you can get it in a couple minutes or less with the right question and the right model. So it's really been a good way to get quick answers. I saw some stat a while ago that was like more than half of all Google searches now end without clicking on a result because of Google's AI kind of overview and their initial response there.
Mhm.
So I thought that was very interesting. Obviously, there are errors in that. I went to a concert last night. We Googled what's the bag policy for my friends who were trying to bring in their little purses or whatever,
Yeah.
and it gave me an old bag policy that it said it had to be clear. We double checked it, so it was wrong. So always be
Yeah.
careful with those
What did
initial Google
what
AI
what
reviews.
tool
But
did you use for that search?
that was just Google search. So the Google like AI summary that they give you
Summary?
right when
Yeah.
you search something,
Yeah.
uh, some like research showed that like more than half of all Google searches ended in no clicks now because people are just taking
Just
like
for the
that
answer.
AI initial answer. Most of the time it is right. Always double check because we were able
Yeah.
to get the bags in that we thought we
So
weren't going to.
SEO
So
is completely gonna change, which I've
yeah,
been seeing for the past 6 months.
definitely.
What's funny, the reason why I asked is I was curious because I find that Google's AI summaries are not very helpful, personally.
Yeah.
I find that ChatGPT is good for historical things that are factual, but not great for as up to date stuff. You can use, web search and stuff, but anything that's like timely, I go to Perplexity because it's going to go and I can give it very clear details, like because if you ask it like, hey, what's the bag policy for this conference? It could look at like 3 years ago because that's what it found, right? But if you're like for 2025, it's like, oh, okay, like that's a different story. Again, good prompting and stuff like that.
Right.
But it's true. Like they're not always 100% accurate, and they've gotten so much better. There's this big concern about hallucinations where they would just make stuff up and it sounded believable, and people just believed it because they couldn't do the work to like verify. A lot of that stuff is starting to go away now with like human level reasoners and stuff like that. So it's getting better, but you still, I mean, anytime I run like a calculation using it, the first time I do it, I still manually check it. You know what I mean? It's like just in case, or, I'll at least sanity check. Is that reasonable for what I expect? But I always have this hack where I just say, no matter if I believe it or not, triple check your math and ensure that's correct. And sometimes I'll be like, I think that's correct. It looks right. And then it'll be like, oh, actually, I did this one thing wrong. I'm like, okay. So you can have it correct itself and then give you the answer, But if it's a recurring thing, it's like any other kind of automation or software. Like you verify it before you trust it, and eventually you do enough verifications that you're like, okay, it's right 100% of the time. I'm going to trust this unless it gets crazy.
Yeah, specifically like numerical things. I feel like it's off. Various AIs aren't great at like counting instances. Google's like AI within like sheets and stuff isn't great at like counting up certain values, but like the Google AI is good for like those conversational searches is what I call them. Like, where was this actor born? How old are they? Certain stuff like that, where it is like they were born here on this date. But once you're looking for like specific things that wouldn't necessarily be tied to like someone's Wikipedia page per se, that's where you kind of want to still make sure you click through the search results and see what the actual answer may be. But it has been interesting. And like you said, Perplexity is definitely a better general search engine. I have yet to like make that my primary search engine on my phone. So I'm still using like the Google there. But yeah, it definitely just speeds things up and gives you more often than not very informative and actionable information, but definitely want to double check it, especially if you're using it in a new way for the first time. You want to make sure that it's kind of going through that logic properly, or that you've prompted it correctly to get the desired response.
Well, I'll share something that I did over the past few weeks. I used GPT-03. So like their best model. I'm on Plus. I'm not on like the pro expensive tier. I'm on Plus. Sure. And so I was kind of going back and forth on growth. So looking at paid acquisition stuff. And so I started to dump it some data. And in chatting through it, we came out with like a 6-page strategy document that I put over into Google Docs, reviewed it, was like, does this rationally make sense? I shared it with some of the ads team that we work with. And I was like, hey, if anything sounds completely outlandish, please tell me. But like, I want your review on this first. And they're like, no, everything makes sense. And since doing that, we have increased our trial volume by like 40-ish% on average. And we've decreased the cost per trial by about 50%. Like, I mean, and that's me chatting, right? That's not even me being like, you have access to the data sets, and it's like I'm manually giving it data, right? So just think about that. Could you use that if you're running, Amazon ads for your wholesale products or for your private label? Have the conversation. You might find that it just highlights something that's like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. And what's cool is like it'll give you some insights, right? So it'd be like, hey, your quality score is not super great, but what we know is that for every 1 point increase in your quality score for your ads, you get a 12% increase in impressions. And even if nothing else changed, you got more impressions. If we look at our impression to click ratio and then our ratio from click to trial signups, that 1 point increase could yield an extra 1 to 2 trials per day. And you're like, oh, okay. So like it can look at all these minute details and explain the rationale behind it. And even if you're concerned, you can be like, hey, well, I'm kind of concerned about this, playing out this way. And it goes, oh yeah, that is a concern, but I don't think it's going to happen. Or yeah, you don't need to worry about that. Like that rarely happens. I mean, just think about that, right? Because I talk a lot about being able to use this to speed you up and stuff like that too. But it's also just being able to be more effective in a lot of ways that you may not know. And these are things, by the way, that our team didn't catch. Keep that in mind, right? Paying somebody to do this. And I can spend a handful of hours having deep level discussions and pause at any point. I can just be like, cool, I got to jump into a meeting, like whatever, jump back in. So it's like async. And I can come out with a 6-page strategic document that rationally lays out how to approach certain things. And, you can give it goals and say, okay, well, the goal is to achieve this volume, without exceeding this Y value, right? Based on everything I've shown you, is that physically possible? And if so, help me understand how we could get there. And it might be like, that's not physically possible. It's like, all right, cool. Or it might be like, actually, that is possible. And it's more possible than you think it is. If we do these 3 things, assuming it goes the way we think it will, you'll achieve that. And then you're like, whoa, hold on. My outlandish goal is not that difficult to achieve. I just need to do these 3 things. And then, you get some data and you feed it back. Hey, we made those changes. Here's how that's going. Are we on the right track? Yes or no? And then it's just like, oh, well, okay, this thing's not really pumping the way we thought it would. Let's take a look at this. What is that? Right. And you're just going back and forth. And it's actually insane. See, Luis has a great question here. Casey, I'll let you handle this one.
Yeah, so is there a way to reprice based on historical days of supply? So currently we don't have a way to take that information and have that be the primary source of information, if you will, for issuing price updates. What I do recommend, however, is I'll actually, once I answer the question so I don't get myself sidetracked, I'll actually post 2 specific help articles in the chat. One's going to be our recommended core 3 strategies, and the second's going to be our age of inventory workflow. Essentially, this is what we recommend for about 80 to 85% of all of your listings in your account. Our core 3 strategies will start being less aggressive with Maven. Secondly, adjusting to a buy box strategy, usually around the 1 month mark, and then moving to liquidation around the 2 months mark. Essentially, that's just going to reprice in terms of aggressiveness based on how old your inventory is and become more aggressive as time passes so that you don't get hit with any long-term storage fees or any issues like that for inventory that may be getting stale. So we don't have a specific way to reprice based on historical days of supply, but we can reprice based on your current quantity of stock and that specific age, which is in the meantime probably the most effective way to reprice. You always want to try to maximize margins for a new product, but if you're trying to offload it, breaking even or just over is going to be more than ideal in a lot of scenarios. So that's typically what we recommend. But for you, Luis, let me pull up our help docs and I will actually link those 2 specific articles for you and just post those in the chat so you guys can take a look at those.
Nice.
And one other thing that has come up a couple times recently is some folks have, a handful of listings that they want to exclude from their age of inventory workflow. One thing you can actually do is you can include a strategies filter in the age of inventory filter block, if you will, and then you can select all of the strategies that you want included in that age of inventory workflow. So in this case, you would be able to create a separate strategy to assign the listings that you don't want included in the workflow. And then when you add in that filter, you can just not check that strategy, and that will keep any specific listings just on that strategy, regardless of their age of inventory. Just to show you folks here, I'll actually pull up our account. Sorry, Dylan, I'm kind of hijacking this here.
I like it. No, it's good. I like it.
This is something I kind of stumbled upon when trying to find a workaround for a customer. Let me just make sure I'm in.
I like that we try to like hack our own system.
Yeah, because historically, I know some folks had thought that here. Let's do this. Historically, some folks had thought you could only use one specific function in there we go, in one specific filter block. But just as an example here and to kind of illustrate it, we'll see this life cycle workflow, excuse me. And so you'll have that age of inventory there, but let's say I want to not include any listings that are assigned to this buy box target Walmart strategy on this. Walmart's not a good example actually, because that's only available on Amazon or workflows. But let's just say, for example, I want any listing that's assigned to this liquidation strategy to stay on that liquidation strategy, regardless of its age of inventory. I would just check all of these other strategies here and then save that. And any listing that's on that strategy won't be included in the age of inventory workflow. You would just want to make that adjustment to all of the filter blocks so that that is the case as that inventory starts to age there. So kind of a good way to kind of simplify. You don't have to have a whole bunch of filter blocks in a workflow. You can kind of have one filter block do a couple different things for you. I haven't seen anybody use more than just the age of inventory and the strategy function in one filter block. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend having like 4 different settings in one filter block, but that has been an effective workaround for a lot of folks who have, those outlier listings where they want to have a specific repricing strategy regardless of that inventory age.
That's so cool. Funny enough, have never done 2 filters in the same filter block. I know that's probably sounds weird now. I just never thought about it. And the moment you did it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. Because I'm thinking like, we're going to have a bunch of filter blocks and it's going to be, the logic's going to be kind of crazy, but actually it's not. That's great. So basically what you're saying is by putting a listing on a specific strategy, it's kind of negating the workflow for that listing because it's on that strategy. In the moment you want it back in that workflow, you just take it to whatever strategy, and the next hour or up to the next hour, it just goes back to where it should.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you have like that specific strategy where you want those listings to stay assigned, you can set it up the way I just showed. If you wanted to then reapply to every listing in your account, regardless of strategy, you could either just remove that strategy option in that filter block as a whole, or you could check that strategy there as well in that strategy filtering option. So
genius.
Yeah, that was something I stumbled upon a few months ago in terms of just, workflows are a little bit hairy, for lack of a better word, especially as you get more filter blocks included in them. So that was a way to kind of just simplify things for some folks with specific circumstances.
Love that. See, I'm learning stuff. That makes me happy. That is amazing. That's awesome. I see Luis just following up here. Makes sense. But I was looking to somehow slow down sales in order to not get hit with a low inventory fee. Yeah, it's a different one. Only thing I could think of is basically take it back to Maven is the only thing I can really think of that would do that. Or have a non-aggressive rule-based strategy. So you could reprice above the buy box by like 10 cents or something like that. So you're still tracking with it, but like you can get some sales, but you're going to slow them down a lot. You could do that too. So you might do like a rule-based strategy, name it like slow down, like sales slow down or something like that. So it's very clear. And whenever you need to do that, you just throw it onto that guy. And then I would just price above the buy box by like I said, maybe 10 cents, maybe a few percentage points, something along those lines.
Mhm. Yeah, I would recommend either that or, like Dylan said, using Maven.
Yeah.
Though Maven does have that sales velocity and margin balance, it does favor the margin side of things. And
Yeah.
as inventory ages, it's not going to automatically become more aggressive. So that would probably be the best bet if you're trying to just maintain steady sales without selling too quickly. I would
Yeah.
recommend that Maven option. And then, if you do get to a point where you want to become more aggressive, you could switch to a rules-based strategy, either our standard liquidation or buy box strategy there.
Nice. Yeah. Great question, Luis. And any other questions? We've got about 15 minutes left here on the clock. Any other questions we could dive deep into, or any rabbit holes that we can geek out with you guys on? We're more than happy to do so. We did just get another update from ChatGPT today. I've yet to see it on my end, but they're allowing you to connect to like Linear, Gmail, all these different things, which Claude has allowed us to do for a little bit of time. But it's funny, I was very hardcore OpenAI. Claude came out. Claude was fantastic, and I still use it for a lot of things. But now with like 4.0 and 0.3, I'm like way more back on ChatGPT. It's getting pretty fun.
Yeah, Dylan, one general question I have, I think I might know the
Yeah.
answer, but in case anybody in the call does not, from my initial understanding, the main difference between Claude and ChatGPT in terms of functionality, one thing that seemed like a big add-on for Claude rather, was the ability to kind of upload specific documents within one project and kind of inform its decision making or logic based on specific documents you've uploaded. Is that an option on ChatGPT right now, or is that kind of exclusive to Claude? Okay.
It is now. So that's what drove me to Claude pretty heavily, is their projects. That was amazing. GPT now has GPT projects. You can also just create like a custom GPT and upload, and that's been that way for a while. I just didn't like the interface personally. Sure. But yeah, now you have Chat GPT projects. I've not spent a whole lot of time. I've been considering, do I want to move some of my stuff over? Weirdly enough, I went to go do it one day, and Claude does not allow me to just download all the things I uploaded, which really sucks. And some of the projects I have like 30 documents in there. And so I have to copy the data inside of each one and then manually move it over, which really just sucks. Yeah. So there's some switching costs there. I assume they do that for that reason. But what I will say is, like, I still very much love what I'm getting with Claude projects. If it was easy for me to switch over all that data to ChatGPT, I would. But my default now is ChatGPT because the O3 model, especially with deep research, is phenomenal. So if I just have like a random crazy idea, or if I want to like explore different futuristic technologies like quantum mechanics, quantum computing, I was making dinner the other night and I was just like, I really think that in the very near future, car ownership won't be there unless you just want to own a car. Like, for people who are not car people, you don't really care. And that's already true, like in the city, right? Like a lot of people in downtown Boston don't own cars because they're like, I don't need to. But in more rural areas, you kind of need to. But there's this interesting middle ground where if you don't drive every single day, Uber is cheaper per mile than car ownership. But there's some trade-offs. But with robo-taxis coming out, like the Cybercab, Waymos, the cost per mile is way cheaper than Uber. And so eventually it gets to a point where you could, robo-taxi every single day, 2 to 3 times a day, and it doesn't cost you near as much as what it would cost you to own a vehicle, plus the time and headache of, maintenance and stuff like that. And so instead of just keeping that in my brain, I just turned on the, voice mode and just had a whole conversation. I was like, hey, what is the cost per mile for regular car ownership, for Uber, and what is theorized for these robo-taxis? And it broke it down. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting. And then I was like, okay, well, look up what's normal usage in terms of mileage and then calculate the costs in total per month. And let's see where it makes sense. And then I could say, okay, well, if that's true, then a lot of people won't own cars again once that becomes, widely accessible. And two, how far away are we? Kind of theorize it. It's like, oh, it's like 2 years away. It's like, oh, okay. Like, I might not need a car anymore. So I use it even for random stuff like that. Or I'm watching a movie and I'm like, I was watching Batman. I was like, I'm big into biohacking and peptides. It's like, he seems like he'd be a biohacker. You know what I mean? He's got the money. Like, come on. And I was just like, hey, go research a bunch of peptides and biohacks. And based on what we all know about Batman as a character, as a fictional character, theorize what peptides he would use and why. And it did. I was like, well, that's actually kind of cool. Now I'm like, I kind of want to do that. I want to be Batman, So it's you can just do some dorky fun things with it too, and just explore different curiosities simply because, you jump in there and be like, my memory sucks. How do I make that better? Okay, well, you could take that, pharmacological. You could take that from a meditative perspective. You can take that from a methodology perspective. So, learning memory palace techniques, different memory. I mean, there's a memory championship every year. You get together and it's like chess, but for memory. And there's plenty of coaches that teach different techniques for memory. There's different books on it and stuff. So you can go from, I've always been curious about this thing, to you got 3 books on it. You got summaries of each of the books to see if it's actually worth you reading or not. And you have a full general landscape of that world. It's just fun, man. It really feels like you're peeling behind the curtain of reality sometimes. Mm-hmm. It's just like, I didn't know that existed, but now you just discovered it and you're like, oh, there's this whole parallel reality. Like, this is crazy. But it's fun. And then so you kind of start there, and then you eventually start asking more serious questions. How can I make my diet better? Or like, what's a good workout plan for somebody like me with this kind of time constraint? Mm-hmm. And based on like my goals and what I'm trying to achieve. Or, I'm really struggling managing my cash flow in my business. Here's a bunch of context, a bunch of information for me, about me, my business. What should I do? Or what's the terminology I am not aware of that I should be aware of? And tell me in simple language what each of those things mean. So now if I go to have a conversation with a CPA or whatever, I can have the language to have a more direct conversation than them saying something, me being like, I don't know what the heck that means. It's like, I already kind of have it. So it's dumbfounding, for lack of a better term. I tell you, it's like, it's hard to sleep because sometimes you come across an idea and you're just like, this could change everything, and I don't know how, but I feel it, and I don't know how I feel about it. This is really cool, kind of scary. What does this mean? And then it's like existential crisis after existential crisis.
Yeah, of course. I don't think we need to worry about like the Terminator scenario or anything just yet.
I was just gonna say, there's one guy who was sitting front row. He had some great questions. He was funny, but we, as I'm showing different things, he's like, they made a movie about that, right? I'm like, yeah. And then I showed like the robots. He's like, again, they made a movie called iRobot about this, right? I'm like, yeah. I was like, movies are best when they're dystopian, not utopian, but I digress. Nice. So I think we will end it here for time, unless there's any other questions. Appreciate everybody making the time. Again, apologies for not being able to do this last week. We were in Orlando for the Proven Conference, but we will be back next week between 2 and 3 p.m. EST on Wednesday. That's when we do this. Again, this is open office hours, meaning there is no format here. We typically jump on with some things, whether it's news or interesting ideas or whatever I'm geeking out on, just to kind of get the ball rolling. But we're really here for an hour for you guys to answer any questions you have, go down any rabbit holes that you guys want to go down, and just make sure that it's a high value usage of your time, one hour a week. But with that, we will let you get back to the rest of your week and enjoy it.
Yeah, have a good week, folks.